Thank you guys so much for having me, and what a tough act to follow, but what an incredible privilege to be up here with some people that I really respect and have worked for a long time for. We've been talking a lot about South Australian retrieval and some of the kind of insider football, what is it like? And what I'd like to do with this talk is bring you guys along for the journey and figure out with you what is your role in paediatric retrieval and how do we together work on helping children all around Australia. So just a quick straw poll, how many of you are currently involved in paediatric retrieval? So a portion of you, and some of this will all apply to you, I hope, or not, whatever, we'll see how good of a speaker I am. But hopefully this will also be helpful for the rest of you in the room, just to get the creative juices flowing, because I do like to just talk about the what if sometimes, and hopefully that will be interesting to you. I was asked to give, as per usual with Don't Forget the Bubbles, a very vague title, which I really appreciate because it lets you take it wherever you want to go. And so I was asked to speak on joined up thinking in paediatric retrieval. And it took me a while to figure out, where do I want to go with this? And so there's really three areas that I want to focus on today with you guys. I want to talk about joining up access to care for our rural, regional and remote children in Australia. And my apologies to my UK friends, but I hope that this will also be applicable to you as you think about your own environments, and my New Zealand friends who have to take a lot more helicopters because there's a lot more islands and things. That's so exciting. So joining up access. I'd also like to talk today about joining up quality of care in paediatric retrieval and the care provided to our rural, regional and remote children. And then I want to talk about joining up a lifetime. And let's see where this takes us. So first, joining up access. Why does this matter? Well, if we look at the healthcare situation with clinicians all around Australia, these are some statistics I found, and I'm sure it's a little bit variable, but in general, there are healthcare providers in the cities. There's about half as many healthcare providers per capita in remote areas, and about a third as many healthcare providers for very remote people in Australia. And so I want to talk about how do we improve access to care when we're dealing with this very real issue. We don't have enough healthcare providers. There's a worldwide shortage in healthcare providers. And then if you don't grow up very remote, it's really hard to convince people to go and live very remote to practice and take care of kids. What do we do about that? Why does it matter? This map, and I've put on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, a link to this website, which is actually really phenomenal. It's the Child and Youth Health Atlas, that you can just get all kinds of statistics on how are kids doing across Australia when it comes to healthcare. And this map, you can see the little areas surrounded by orange. This shows the rate of preventable hospitalisations for children aged 0 to 14 across Australia. The areas that are circled in orange, that rate is 2.5 times the baseline rate for Australians. So you can already see that we've got a problem. It's outside of the major cities, it's where there's not enough healthcare providers, and they're 2.5 times more likely to be hospitalised for something preventable. At the same time, this is where all of our emergency departments are. And this is, a lot of us are based in paediatric emergency in some way, shape or form. Immediately, this is obvious, we all know this, but I think when you put them together on a map, it's really stark to me, the difference in access that our remote children have and the impact that it has on them when it comes to being sent to hospital. I'm here to talk about retrieval, so I probably should do that. These are the paediatric and neonatal retrieval services around Australia. And again, you notice that it's right where all the emergency departments are. We've got some extraordinary paediatric and neonatal retrieval services around the country. You'll notice Alice Springs isn't there. There's a fantastic retrieval service, which is a joint RFDS and NT health retrieval service. If there's a super prem baby, it's MedStar from South Australia or NET's Northern Territory from Darwin that has to come down and get that super prem. And so you can see that there is that's a lot of time to go and get someone who needs to go to hospital when they don't have an ED or a hospital nearby. And as Ellie was saying, if you just look at South Australia in the middle, getting halfway across the state is going to take you a couple of hours. These are big distances. How do we overcome them? This is a problem to solve, and how do we in this room help? There's a couple of things I want to talk about here. I think sometimes we think that the system needs to be better and someone needs to change it, but change starts with us. all the time, at our own level. And I talked a little bit about this at Don't Forget the Bubbles last year, about that sphere of influence that we all have. And I think that there are things that we can all do to make this map a little bit different. How do we help? CSR are the 3 Sesame Street letters I'm going to use for our talk today. And it's not corporate social responsibility, but it's actually kind of easy to remember if you think about corporate social responsibility. Where I'm working right now, how do I help people outside of that sphere that I'm working in right now? But to me, CSR stands for collaborate, support, and reimagine. And that's what I kind of want to talk about with each of these joined up approaches. So let's have a think about joining up access. How can we collaborate together? One of my least favourite phrases in the universe is when someone says, they're just a. Please don't ever say that to me. They're just a GP. They're just a remote area nurse. Their opinion doesn't count because they're just a paramedic. We need to never think that because we are well-resourced and living in a city and have all of these things at our fingertips, that we're ever any better than any other practitioner anywhere in the country. And I know we don't think that, but deep down, do we sometimes act like that? It's a question I want to ask you today. When you're talking about that retrieval that came in from that regional hospital, do you ever roll your eyes and say, oh my God, can you believe what fluids they gave them? Or when the paramedic comes in, do you read their notes like you would read the discharge summary from the other hospital to find out what happened on that trip? Do you really respect the clinical acumen of that person that's alongside you, but maybe from a slightly different tribe? So the first thing I want to say about joining up access is that there are clinicians all over Australia of all different kinds of disciplines and types. And the more that we can collaborate across disciplines and work with each other and support each other and speak well of each other, listen to each other and help each other finesse pathways and finesse quality of care, I think the better we'll all be. No one's laughing and everyone looks uncomfortable, so I'm going to move on now. So collaborate. It's a simple thing, but who are we talking to on the other end of the phone, and do we thank them for a job well done? Listen really well to their judgment, even when that's a parent whose judgment about their own child is usually going to exceed our own. Support. How do we support our remote colleagues? Some of this is practical stuff that I know tons of us in this room are involved in. APLS, courses, basic, BLS training, EMAT training, going out and helping get our colleagues all in a room. And that's one of the things I love about APLS and courses like that. We all learn together. We're all students who are just as scared about passing our quiz at the end as everybody else. Some of us just hide it a little better, right? So those kinds of supports are really important. How else do we support our colleagues? Are we that person on the end of the phone who is approachable, who they will never feel stupid about calling, or who calls them to give feedback about the job that they did really well on a sick kid before they were retrieved to us? It takes about 5 compliments for each of us to overcome a criticism, right? And do you call your regional hospitals 5 times as often as you call them to report something that went wrong? Have a think about how we build the assets and strengths of those around us. Another way to support is, I think, through our colleges and helping our colleges work really well together. ASIM and ACRIM and RACP all working well together to say, how can we support your people in each of your disciplines? Or the Australian College of Nursing, how are we working well as nursing colleagues to help our remote area nurses have the same kind of input as our emergency and ICU nurses? And then reimagine, what is access? How do we improve access, not by just getting faster planes? I work for RFDS, so I'm a big fan of a faster plane, but it's never going to be fast enough for that golden hour, is it? So how do we reimagine what good quality care looks like for access? And I think this is sometimes about reimagining our systems. A highly skilled emergency department doesn't have to have a FACEM in it, doesn't have to have a full trauma team. We've got amazing rural generalists around the country who run emergency departments 24 hours a day, as Ellie will attest to from all of those telehealth consults, who are highly skilled at picking up and treating sick children. How do we improve access for rural generalist care? How do we improve access via telehealth care? How do we improve access by thinking about new models of care? Are we willing to let go of it should be run by a fellow in paediatric emergency? Or are we okay with a pharmacist prescribing something for a kid because it might be important and the pharmacist is the one healthcare practitioner in town? Reimagining our models of care for the underserved is so important. So after joining up access, how do we join up quality? This is a little map of Australia showing the deterioration of children radar charts for each state. I would like to give a massive shout out to Western Australia, whose rapid and recognition chart is called the Parrot. Round of applause for Western Australia. But they are pipped at the post by Queensland, whose is called the Cute Children's Early Warning Tool. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I saw that and that's how you're going to pronounce it now, right? Ben, is that how you pronounce it? Isn't that adorable? You know what's wacky about this? Every state has got a different chart, different colours, different freaking numbers for the same age kid. Like, really, what are we doing? We can't even agree as states what a sick kid is. This blows my ever-loving mind. And I am embarrassed to say that I didn't know this until we were working on our electronic health record at RFDS. I meant to say I'm wearing all the hats today. I work for RFDS right now, but I've worked for MedStar Kids and I was one of the inaugural consultants, but I didn't go on the first job. But I also work at the Women's and Children's Hospital in a PEDS emergency department, and I've also worked as a rural practitioner, so I feel like I've got this much understanding, but not full understanding of a lot of these areas. And I feel for us as a country whose budget is set according to states, which means that states own the quality of their healthcare, but maybe we don't talk very well to each other. And how do we expect people to move from state to state if a sick kid's not a sick kid as soon as you cross the border? So how do we solve this? Well, I don't know. Someone's got to fix it though, right? What I do wonder is how well do we talk to each other as a paediatric emergency community? This is going to sound so superficial and silly, but hashtags on social media are a really interesting thing to me, right? And during COVID, when we were all awash with information and didn't know what to look at and where to find information, did you find yourself, maybe it's just me, this is going to be really embarrassing, finding a hashtag and seeing what the conversation was happening in that space? My favourite hashtag at the moment is PEDSICU because it's the only hashtag that paediatric intensive care doctors all use to say, let's all talk about this study. And you can see what discourse is happening at a national and global level. And I find that really helpful when there's 1 billion new journal articles a day to say, what should I be reading? I don't know. Well, if they're all talking about this one on the PEDSICU hashtag, I'll give that a red hot go. In retrieval medicine, we don't even know what a retrieval hashtag is. There's hashtag HEMS, hashtag PHRM, hashtag PHRAARM, hashtag PHEM if you're American. So what's paediatric retrieval? All of those with the kids at the end? I don't know. So my challenge today is, can we just come up with a hashtag so we can keep this conversation going at the end of this? Because I feel like if we were able to bring some of this together in the literature or at a national level or at a retrieval director's level, maybe we could bring together at least the simple stuff like, how do we recognise a sick kid? Let's have a national RDR chart. I don't think that would be that hard. That's the simple stuff. When it comes to retrieval, there's no real triage scale. We really rely on clinician judgment, which is excellent, which is why we have FACEMs and FRACPs and people who are making these really hard decisions with conflicting tensions and resources and constraints. But I think there's conversations to have about the Australian triage scales used in every emergency department across the country. How do we figure out who a sick kid is when it comes to retrieval and how do we prioritise them? I think there's conversations to be had about that. And then I think there are conversations to be had, and Queensland's actually doing this really well, about statewide guidelines for retrieval or national guidelines for retrieval, even for the most common things in a certain age group. But I think there are places to start where if we built consistency across the states, it would mean that remote practitioners know what to expect no matter where they're working, and that no matter if they pick up the phone and call the virtual care service in Sydney, but they live in Ceduna because it's been rooted there because it's my private health man, whatever, that we would be talking the same language. And I think that's really important for us to define what is sick and then what data are we collecting on that, and then how do we improve what we're doing. So there's a couple of things in my collaborate, support and reimagine here for how we join up quality. Collaborate across your colleges. Let's support a national language towards at least agreeing on some of the simple stuff maybe. I want to say the neo-EBM hashtag is a good one actually, because neonatologists, Amy and Brett and Brian, I know, all kind of, use that same thing to say, let's pull together some conversations. I think we could do better about that in paediatrics. It's a real pity the Americans drop the A, even though I'm married to an American and it's a very efficient way of spelling things, because we can't even agree on how to spell paediatric, for the love. It's just insane. Reimagining our quality in paediatric retrieval, what I want to imagine is a place where no matter where you work, we speak the same language and we hear each other the same. And I think that just avoids a lot of conflict, duplication and misunderstanding that could serve our kids in the long run. My final point is joining up a lifetime. And I just wanted to throw this out there because as a paediatrician, I never used to think about this, but now that I'm leading a general retrieval service, and in Central Australia as well, this really hits me a lot more. When we look at our remote Aboriginal communities, we all know that the lifespan and life expectancy of these communities is not what it should be, and it's a national embarrassment, to be perfectly frank. And it's things like diabetes, it's things like stroke, it's social determinants of health-caused issues. And I think sometimes I look at those and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm not in adult medicine. That is way too hard to solve. But life expectancy starts at birth. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. If we're looking at, I've just picked 3 of the major issues in our remote communities, our remote Aboriginal communities: suicide, stroke and bronchiectasis. Where does this interface with us and what we're doing in the day-to-day? Suicide might be a result of alcoholism, and alcoholism might be a result of isolation. Around 17% of Aboriginal people aged 15 and above report chronic and high-risk drinking levels. How often have you asked a 12-year-old Aboriginal child about their substance use? Are there things that we could do to raise at least a little bit of data collection and understanding of how soon these things start before we get to the, oh no, they're hypertensive? Bronchiectasis. This can actually result from protracted bacterial bronchitis. A wet cough for 4 weeks that hasn't responded to 2 weeks of antibiotics in Central Australian kids, which started out as an upper respiratory tract infection. How often do we actually really think about some of these things as oh, they're just coughing, it'll go away eventually, as opposed to, could this be what causes bronchiectasis down the line? Having our thinking about the long life expectancy of our kids is important. And then stroke, caused by hypertension, caused by post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, caused by chronic impetigo. How often do we link these things together in our minds and think, I could be preventing that from happening when this person's a grandparent? So I just wanted to throw that out there. Do we take the little things seriously, knowing that they add up over time? I think one of the problems is that we have these really fragmented systems, right? We have state dashboards, we've got state inpatient dashboards, we've got longitudinal retrieval records, but do we link them together if someone's been a frequent flyer, especially if they've gone to different hospitals? We've got My Health record, which you can opt out of, and maybe is an incomplete record, but at least it crosses state lines. Primary health and other things are all in the private sector, and they're also fragmented that I know that we don't ever have the full picture of someone that we're looking after. And theoretically, the GP is the home of the longitudinal record, right? But we all know the GP shortage. We have mobile populations, we've got people that move, and then we've got people that can't get in to see their GP. And these records all become fragmented and dispersed over time. So what can we do to identify the patterns that are developing? There's a couple of things that I think we in this room can do to start bringing some of this together so that we start impacting the long-term trajectory of our kids. I think we need to collaborate. An amazing thing about retrieval services in every state in Australia is that they bring together practitioners who are keeping up their skills somewhere else, and they are the melting pot of most emergency departments and ICUs and operating theatres in the state. And it's where people come together and work in the same room and chat about the different guidelines and the different approaches that are happening. And I think that retrieval services are actually really well placed to be those state consolidators of information sometimes between regional practitioners, private practitioners, state-based hospitals and more. And is there a responsibility that retrieval services have to actually start building that longitudinal picture when it's so fragmented elsewhere and there's sometimes that central point? How do we support better data collection over the lifespan of a child into adulthood? I think that all of us are involved in some way, shape or form with some awful electronic health record wherever we work. I'm not going to ask people to put up hands or grade their electronic health record out of 10. But as paediatricians, I think we have a responsibility to get involved in these projects. Make sure that they're fit for purpose, that they're safe for kids, that they're user-friendly, but that they also start to consolidate and bring together information for children. Maybe there should be a flag if you've had four visits for impetigo about screen the urine even if there's not hematuria. I don't know, but how do we pull together the long-term picture of kids as retrieval services around the country? How do we reimagine retrieval not just as a point-to-point care where maybe we'll see them again, maybe we don't, but a consolidator of all the agencies with a unique view possibly of a patient's life over their lifespan? So in case it wasn't clear, this is my take-home point, because I think it applies pretty much to anything that we do, whether you're in retrieval or not. Let's keep collaborating and talking to each other. Let's keep supporting each other no matter what discipline we're in, no matter where we work. And let's keep reimagining what could healthcare look like across the lifespan of the child in the quality of the care that they're receiving and the access that they get. Thank you.